I've decided to start a new life without my daughter. The words hung in the air of the rustic Vermont barn where we'd gathered to celebrate my wedding. My father, Richard Parker, stood with his champagne glass still raised, his announcement displacing the toast he was supposed to be making to my marriage. The fairy lights strung across wooden rafters seemed to dim as 200 guests fell silent, waiting for my reaction. The clinking of silverware ceased. Conversations halted mid-sentence. My new husband, Mark, squeezed my hand under the table as my father continued his public execution of our relationship. While we've tried to maintain appearances today, Margaret and I cannot in good conscience celebrate this union. Emily was raised with every advantage, yet chooses to throw it all away on someone who will never provide the life she deserves. From this day forward, she is no longer our daughter. My mother nodded beside him, her pearl necklace catching the light as she tilted her chin in agreement. From the corner of my eye, I could see Mark's parents, simple, honest people from Ohio, their expressions frozen in horror. My maid of honor, Jessica, half rose from her seat, ready to defend me, but I gave her the slightest shake of my head. For the tears, the shouting, the dramatic exit everyone expected, instead I smiled. I am Emily Parker, now Emily Sullivan, and I was about to change the narrative my parents had written for me for 28 years. As Mark started to stand, ready to defend my honor, I gently touched his arm. "It's okay," I whispered, my hand slipping into the hidden pocket of my wedding dress, fingers closing around the envelope I'd placed there this morning, just in case. I grew up in Westport, Connecticut, in a stone mansion with a view of Long Island Sound. The Parker name meant something. My father's investment firm managed billions, while my mother transformed her beauty and social connections into currency, chairing every prestigious charity board in the tri-state area. There was one moment when my father actually showed genuine pride in me. At 17, I won the National Economics Challenge, beating students from prep schools across the country. That night, he stayed up late with me, sketching investment strategies on a napkin, his eyes bright with something I rarely saw, pride without agenda. "You have my mind for numbers," he said, his hand briefly touching my shoulder. That moment made the disappointment worse when it inevitably returned. At 17, my father tried to pair me with a tech heir, claiming it was for my future. I sabotaged the dinner with talk of wealth redistribution, earning 3 months of his silent fury. When Harvard and Boston University both accepted me, I chose BU's finance program despite my father's rage. That night, locked in my room, I reviewed my secret investment portfolio, 24,000 grown from carefully saved allowance. While my friends shopped for designer clothes, I was buying fractional shares in Amazon, Tesla, and several promising biotech startups. I studied my father's investment journals secretly, learning to spot undervalued assets. He never knew I was his best student. I met Mark while volunteering, his kindness a stark contrast to my parents' world. At 16, I invested €50 birthday money in Amazon, growing it to €24 by college. At 22, I risked $20 on NeuralSphere, an AI startup my father mocked as amateur tech nonsense when Google acquired them for billions. My investment turned into €600 overnight. Not every investment worked. I lost €10 on a failed biotech startup, but it taught me to trust my instincts over market hype. My analyst job at Wellington Financial gave me a steady income to fuel bigger risks. Like my 200,000 cryptocurrency trade that tripled before I sold at the peak, securing 600 in profits before the inevitable crash. When Mark finally met my parents, my father could barely maintain his facade of politeness. "A teacher," my mother repeated later on the phone, the word dripping with disdain. "Darling, this can't be serious. The Ellison's son just made partner at Goldman Sachs, and he's asked about you twice." "I love Mark," I said simply. "Love doesn't pay country club memberships," my father interjected, having picked up the extension. "You're being childish, Emily." When Mark proposed with his grandmother's modest diamond ring, I said yes without hesitation. But I kept my growing fortune secret, even from him. Some shields are hard to lower, even for love. The plaza has an opening in June. My mother announced the week after our engagement, assuming control as she always did. I've already spoken with their event coordinator. The Whitneys and the Andersons will expect invitations. Of course, and your father's clients. Mark and I were sitting in my parents' meticulously decorated living room, my engagement ring catching sunlight from the floor-to-ceiling windows. I glanced at Mark, whose expression remained polite despite the steamrolling happening before him. Actually, we were thinking of something smaller, I ventured. Maybe the Willowbrook barn in Vermont. Mark's aunt got married there, and it's beautiful. My mother's smile froze. A barn? Emily? Don't be ridiculous. Parkers don't get married in barns. If you want our contribution, my father added from behind his newspaper, you'll do it properly. I took a deep breath and squeezed Mark's hand. We appreciate the offer, but we'll pay for it ourselves. The newspaper lowered, revealing my father's incredulous expression. On a teacher's salary in your entry-level position? Don't be absurd. Little did they know that my entry-level position had been supplemented by investment returns that now totaled just over $2 million. I'd recently started the paperwork for my own financial consultancy firm, focusing on helping women achieve financial independence. In the months that followed, my parents oscillated between cold disapproval and manipulative attempts to regain control of the wedding plans. Mark weathered it all with remarkable patience, never once suggesting I compromise to make peace. 1 week before the wedding, my mother called with an unexpected olive branch. We've decided to attend, she said, her voice carefully modulated. Families should be together on important days. Relief washed over me. Despite everything, some childish part of me still wanted my parents' approval, their presence as I began this new chapter. There's just one condition, she continued. Your father would like to give a toast. I should have known then, but hope can be as blinding as fear. The morning of my wedding, I placed several documents in my wedding dress pocket, a feature I'd specifically requested from the seamstress, just in case. But as I walked down the aisle toward Mark, his face illuminated with love, I truly believed everything would be okay. Our ceremony was everything we'd wanted, intimate, meaningful, with personalized vows that brought tears to our guests' eyes. Mark's voice caught as he promised to build a life of purpose and joy with me. I promised to stand beside him through whatever challenges we faced, never suspecting how quickly that vow would be tested. The reception began with cocktails and laughter. My college roommate twirled on the dance floor with Mark's brother. My colleagues from Wellington chatted with Mark's fellow teachers. For a magical hour, the worlds blended seamlessly, and I allowed myself to believe that the walls between my past and future had finally come down. Then the dinner bell rang, and the wedding planner announced it was time for toasts. Mark's father went first, a salt-of-the-earth man who spoke simply about love and hard work, about how proud he was to welcome me to their family. My brother William delivered a polite but distant toast, careful not to contradict the narrative our parents had constructed about my choice of husband. When my father took the microphone, the room quieted in anticipation. He looked immaculate in his bespoke suit, his silver hair perfectly styled, the very image of success and authority. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. My wife and I have always wanted the best for our daughter, he began, his voice carrying across the now silent room. The best education, the best opportunities, the best connections to secure her future. I felt Mark tense beside me as my father continued. But sometimes, children make choices that parents cannot support. While we've tried to maintain appearances today, Margaret and I cannot in good conscience celebrate this union. Emily was raised with every advantage, yet chooses to throw it all away on someone who will never provide the life she deserves. From this day forward, she is no longer our daughter. The glass in his hand remained raised, a mockery of the celebratory gesture it was meant to be. My mother nodded beside him, her face a mask of righteous disapproval. 200 pairs of eyes turned to me, waiting for the tears, the drama, the scene that would be gossiped about for years to come. Mark half rose, fury evident in every line of his body, but I gently placed my hand on his arm. This was my battle, and for once, I was fully armed for it. I stood slowly, smoothing the silk of my wedding dress. The barn was so quiet I could hear the rustle of leaves outside. With deliberate calm, I walked to where my father stood, took the microphone from his hand, and turned to face our guests. "I want to thank my father for his honesty," I began, my voice surprisingly steady. "It makes what I'm about to do much easier." I reached into the hidden pocket of my wedding dress and withdrew an envelope, holding it up so everyone could see. "While you've been busy judging my choices, I've been building my own legacy. I started investing the allowance you gave me at 16. By 21, I had 100? No. By 25, $500,000. Today, at 28, my portfolio is valued at just over $2 million. A collective gasp rippled through the room. I opened the envelope and held up the documents, bank statements, investment portfolio summaries, and the registration for my new financial consultancy business. This includes my early investment in Neuralsphere before Google acquired them, cryptocurrency profits I secured before the market crashed, and 12 other strategic investments that consistently outperformed market averages. And yes, I funded this entire wedding. The same wedding you tried to control with money that I didn't need. My father's face drained of color. His champagne glass slipped from his fingers, shattering against the hardwood floor. The sound echoed through the suddenly silent barn. My mother swayed slightly, grabbing the edge of a table to steady herself. "She's exaggerating," my father suddenly exclaimed, turning to the stunned guests. "Those are just lucky investments. Nothing compared to what my firm manages. Emily's always had a flair for drama." "Actually, Richard," came a voice from the back as Stanley Weber, my father's oldest friend and business partner, stood up. "Her Neuralsphere deal outperformed your last 5 ventures combined. We've been tracking her portfolio for years. You taught her well, maybe too well, considering she outdid your last quarterly returns." Nervous laughter rippled through the room. My father's face flushed crimson. My mother stepped forward, tears streaking her perfect makeup. "Emily, please," she hissed, grabbing my arm. "Don't do this in front of everyone." I gently removed her hand. "You chose this stage?" "Mom, I'm just finishing the performance." From across the room, Christopher Reeves, my father's longtime business rival, raised his glass with a smirk. "Looks like the Parker legacy just got rewritten," he called out, causing several guests to turn and stare. You're lying," my father finally sputtered, his voice rising. "This is impossible." "Is it, Richard?" Stanley continued. "Your daughter approached our firm's venture capital division 3 years ago under her maiden name. We funded her advisory startup because her investment strategy was brilliant. I only realized who she was at the rehearsal dinner." My father whirled toward Stanley, his face contorting with rage. "You knew? And said nothing?" "She asked for confidentiality." Stanley shrugged, and frankly, her returns were too good to pass up. I turned back to face my parents. "You disowned someone you never really knew. I've been independent from you for years, financially and emotionally. Today just makes it official." Mark stepped forward, taking my hand. "Mr. and Mrs. Parker," he said, his voice steady but resonating through the silent room. "For years I've watched Emily doubt her worth because nothing she did ever seemed good enough for you. You've missed knowing an extraordinary woman because you were too fixated on status to see her value. That's your loss, not hers." My father lunged forward, jabbing his finger toward Mark. You're after her money," Mark laughed, actually laughed, the sound breaking the tension. "Sir, I just found out about it 30 seconds ago. Same as you." "Mr. Parker," Mark added, his voice calm but cutting. "I married Emily for her heart, not her bank account. Something you clearly never understood." The room erupted in uncomfortable laughter, followed by applause that began at Mark's family's tables and spread throughout the barn, except for the small island of silence where my parents stood frozen in humiliation, illuminated by the fairy lights that suddenly seemed to dim around them as whispers spread like wildfire among the guests. "You never told me," Mark whispered as he pulled me close. "I wanted to be loved for who I am, not what I'm worth," I replied. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way." He kissed me softly. "I fell in love with the woman who brings extra lunches for my students, not your bank account." "Emily, we need to talk." My mother intercepted us as we moved between guest tables an hour later. She had composed herself, though her perfect makeup couldn't hide the tightness around her eyes. I think enough has been said for one day, I replied, keeping my voice low. This is all a misunderstanding, she insisted, touching my arm. Your father was just concerned about your future. If you'd known I was wealthy, you'd have approved of my choice? I finished for her. That's exactly the problem. Mom? My father appeared behind her, his face flushed with a dangerous combination of anger and calculation. You used my own lessons against me, he hissed, low enough that only we could hear. We were protecting your future, my mother added desperately. You valued status over me. That's not protection, I replied simply. Before they could respond, Mark stepped between us. Mr. Parker, he said quietly but firmly, this is our wedding day. I've respected your position as Emily's father for years, even when you made it clear you thought I wasn't good enough. But today, you crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. I'm asking you politely to leave. My father's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed. You think you have any right to speak to me that way? Now that you know she has money? I fell in love with your daughter, Mark interrupted, when she was tutoring underprivileged kids for free. The same daughter who cried after you missed her college graduation because of a business emergency. The same woman who still kept your photo on her nightstand despite how you treated her. I know exactly who Emily is. Sir, I'm not convinced you ever did. My mother gasped at Mark's audacity, but something in my father's expression shifted. Perhaps the first flicker of recognition that he might have misjudged the situation entirely. My only regret, I said quietly, is that my worth to you is measured in dollars. Please leave our wedding, as security discreetly escorted my parents out. Mrs. Dupont, my mother's oldest social rival, approached with a champagne flute in hand. I always knew you had your father's business sense. Dear, she said loudly enough for my retreating parents to hear. Margaret has been bragging about your financial genius at the club for years. Just like her father, she always said. Pity she didn't bet on you sooner. I stared at her in disbelief. My mother said that? Mrs. Dupont nodded, oblivious to the bombshell she'd just dropped. Oh yes, after you made that killing on that tech company. Margaret always said you were her secret weapon at the club auctions. Pity she didn't bet on you sooner? They had known, maybe not everything, but enough. The betrayal cut deeper than I expected. After the Duponts moved on, William approached awkwardly. I didn't know the extent, but I suspected you were doing well. Did they know? Really know? He hesitated. Dad had the family lawyer look into your finances about 6 months ago. He was impressed, but he still thought Mark was taking advantage somehow. William shifted uncomfortably. Dad's furious. I've never seen him like this. Are you here to defend him? I asked, suddenly tired. William shook his head. I'm here to say I'm sorry. I should have stood up for you. The rest of the reception passed in a blur of dancing, laughter, and genuine celebration. Without the shadow of my parents' disapproval, the room seemed brighter, the music more joyful. Our honeymoon was a simple week in a cabin on the Maine coast. No luxury resort, no European tour, just us in the Atlantic Ocean. The morning after our arrival, we sat on the porch watching waves crash against rocky shores, a comfortable silence between us. So, Mark finally said, you're a secret millionaire. I laughed despite myself. That sounds like a bad Hallmark movie. I'm serious. $2 million? Your own company? Why didn't you tell me? I wrapped my hands around my coffee mug, searching for the right words. At first, it was protection. Money was always my parents' control mechanism. If they thought I was financially dependent, they couldn't know I was building my own security. But later, after we got engaged, I looked at him then, vulnerability replacing the composure I'd maintained through the wedding drama. I was afraid. Of what? That it would change things between us. That you might feel diminished somehow, or that you might love the security more than me. My whole life, I've watched people valued for their money or connections. I just wanted someone to love me for myself. Mark was quiet for so long that anxiety fluttered in my chest. I understand why you kept it from them, he finally said. But I wish you'd trusted me. Partnership means sharing burdens and blessings. I know. I'm sorry. He took my hand. No more secrets? No more secrets, I promised. Though I should warn you, I also have a small apartment in New York that I rent out, and I've been looking at commercial properties in Boston for the consultancy. Mark laughed. The tension broken. Next, you'll tell me you own a private island. Wait, do you? Not yet, but I'm eyeing a nice one on Airbnb, I replied with a smile. We spent the rest of the morning planning how to use our resources, my unexpected wealth and Mark's passion for education. We decided to start a foundation focused on financial literacy for underprivileged students, combining our strengths for something meaningful. We'll live comfortably but not extravagantly, I suggested. No need to change who we are just because we can, Mark agreed readily. Though I wouldn't say no to a slightly better apartment. Our current place has those mysterious water stains on the ceiling. That night, I deleted my parents' contact information from my phone. It was a small gesture, but it felt like setting down a heavy weight I'd carried for too long. 6 months after our wedding, autumn had painted New England in brilliant reds and golds. Mark and I had settled into a comfortable routine in our new home, a modest but charming colonial in a good school district. I was reviewing client portfolios when the doorbell rang. Through the frosted glass, I could make out 2 familiar silhouettes, my parents. "What are you doing here?" I asked after opening the door, not inviting them in. "We thought it was time to clear the air," my mother said, looking past me into the house with barely concealed judgment at its modest furnishings. "May we come in?" My father added, more demand than question. I stepped aside reluctantly. They moved into our living room, taking in the comfortable furniture, the bookshelves filled with well-read volumes, the absence of status symbols they considered essential. "You could afford something much more substantial in a better neighborhood," my mother observed, running her finger along a shelf. "We like this neighborhood. Mark can walk to school." My father got straight to business. "I'll be direct. Emily, the market has been challenging lately. The family firm is facing some temporary difficulties." Understanding dawned. "And suddenly you remembered you have a daughter. Families should support each other through difficult times," my mother interjected smoothly. "That's what we've always taught you." "Is it? Because I remember being disowned quite publicly 6 months ago," my mother sighed, suddenly looking older. "Emily," she said, her voice softening, "I pushed you toward the Whitfields and all those other suitable matches because I was terrified you'd end up like my sister, penniless and alone after a bad marriage. I was wrong about Mark. But I was trying to protect you." The unexpected honesty caught me off guard. I'd never heard my mother reference her sister, who had been all but erased from family history after marrying beneath her station. Protection shouldn't feel like control. "Mom," I replied gently, "I needed your trust, not your plans." My father cleared his throat. "We're offering you a position at the family firm, a chance to come home. You're not here for reconciliation," I said, the clarity striking me with surprising force. "You're here for access to my resources just like always." "That's unfair," my mother protested. Mark appeared in the doorway, having returned from school. He nodded politely to my parents but came to stand beside me, his presence a silent support. "I don't need to be welcomed back into a family that only values what I can provide," I said quietly. "I've built my own family now." "You'll regret this decision," my father warned, his mask of conciliation slipping. "Family legacy matters." "Yes, it does," I agreed. "But I'm creating a new one." 1 year after our wedding, we hosted our first holiday gathering in our home. The dining room table accommodated Mark's parents, his sister and her husband, my brother William and his wife Karen, who had indeed moved to Chicago, and several friends who had become our chosen family. William had changed dramatically since breaking free from our parents' influence. He smiled more, had let his corporate haircut grow into something less severe, and spoke passionately about the legal aid practice he'd started. "When you stood up to them at your wedding," he said as we prepared dessert, "it was like watching someone break an invisible chain I didn't even know we were wearing. I've used your example to help a client escape her controlling family's grip. You showed me freedom isn't just financial, it's choosing who you call family. Karen and I are expecting—" "By the way," he added with a smile, "we haven't told anyone else yet." I hugged him fiercely. "You'll be wonderful parents." In the living room, Mark tapped his glass for attention. "Emily and I have an announcement," he said when everyone quieted. The Sullivan Parker Educational Foundation awarded its first scholarships this week to 5 students from South Boston. Applause rippled through the room. "And," I added, placing my hand over my still flat stomach, "our family will be growing by 1 next summer." The joy that erupted around us was genuine and uncomplicated. No calculations about bloodlines or inheritance. Just love. As our guests departed into the snowy evening, Mark noticed me looking at the small cream envelope on our mantel, a letter from my parents that had arrived the previous week. "Still not ready to open it?" he asked gently. I picked up the envelope, turning it over in my hands. You know what's strange? A part of me still loves them. Even after everything, I remember my father's pride when I won that economics competition, or my mother teaching me to ride a bike. Those moments were real. Mark wrapped his arms around me. Love is complicated. You can still love them and keep your boundaries. "I think I'm ready," I said, carefully opening the envelope. Inside was a check for a significant amount and a brief note in my father's handwriting. For our grandchild's education. No strings attached. I was wrong to measure your worth by my standards. I hope one day you'll let me meet my grandchild. Not for legacy, but for love. I showed it to Mark, who raised an eyebrow. "What will you do?" After a moment's thought, I walked to my desk and wrote across the check, "Donated to Sullivan Parker Educational Foundation in your name." I slipped it into a new envelope with a simple note. "Thank you. The child will know they have grandparents who love them, but will never have to earn that love." As I sealed the envelope, I felt a weight lifting, not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps the beginning of something new. "I'm not doing this to punish them," I explained to Mark. "I want our child to know their grandparents exist, but love doesn't come with a price tag. That's the legacy I want to leave." He nodded, his hand joining mine over my stomach. "Family isn't about bloodlines or balance sheets. It's about who shows up for you with love. Our child will never have to prove their worth to be loved," I whispered. The Parker legacy had been built on appearances and acquisitions. The Sullivan Parker legacy would be different, built on authenticity, compassion, and the courage to define success on our own terms. Sometimes being disowned is the beginning of truly owning yourself. In losing the family I was born into, I had found the strength to create the family I deserved, one where love wasn't conditional and where worth wasn't measured in dollars. A part of me will always love them, but love doesn't mean erasing boundaries. I'm choosing peace for myself and our child. What legacy are you building for your family? Share how you've redefined success in the comments.